We've got Big Dog Brett on the line from right here on YouTube. So you just go up to your search panel right there. You type in Big Dog Brett and check out his work on Georgia football. So shifting gears in terms of head coaches, Kirby Smart, there's little to criticize, but still people find a way, and it has to do with the national championship. Now, I come to his defense all the time because I don't think that there's been enough time. Not that he couldn't have won one, of course, in 2017. And obviously he showed that he can get a team to the brink of a national championship. He can basically win a national championship. If you can establish a 2-score lead in the final game and take it to overtime, you've developed the team and brought them to a place to win a national championship. But he's had a couple missteps in big games. The recruiting has been just incredibly lights out. So Kirby Smart seems to have everything working this year, and this seems to be the year.
As a Georgia fan, unfortunately, especially if you're a fan of the sports in Georgia, we have believed for a very long time that there's a curse. And it always seems like we get 5 feet from the finish line and can't quite get there for whatever reason, whether it's the Atlanta Braves, the Atlanta Falcons. A few years back, the Atlanta United soccer team did win the MLS, so that was exciting. But this year, with I think seeing the Braves win the World Series kind of helped break that mindset. But as a Georgia fan, you always have that nagging feeling in the back of your head, and it always seems like it comes down to Georgia, Alabama. So we're going to see another classic Georgia-Alabama. What we have seen in years past is when Georgia plays Alabama, if we put together a good solid game plan, we can take Alabama to the wire just as good as anybody can. In the national championship that Alabama won against Georgia, that was hard fought by both teams. Took me back to the Aaron Murray days where Georgia and Alabama's playing, and we get a tip ball and we catch it on like the 2 or 3 yard line. Aaron Murray, high completion percentage in the red zone. Another pass, if we drop that pass, statistically speaking, it's very likely the next pass would have been a caught ball or a touchdown. And then they go on to play Notre Dame. Alabama absolutely trashed Notre Dame. It's likely Georgia would have done the same. So Georgia's got all these things in the back of its head. But I really feel like this Georgia team is built different this year. The mentality is different. Kirby Smart seems to be a little more open to allowing the offense to open up, which was nice. Some of us kind of felt that it was a little bit conservative, and a lot of Georgia fans questioned his choice with going with Jake Fromm rather than Justin Fields. We obviously saw what Justin Fields was able to do at Ohio State. But while we didn't win that national championship, I really feel like that set the tone and the expectation for what Kirby Smart was looking for out of the program. This also translated over to the recruiting trail, which has been dominant ever since. Georgia has tons of talent all over the field. In this particular year, you can see it on defense. So for me, seeing what we're going to go up with against Alabama and then going back and looking at the stats with Stetson Bennett, I know a lot of people are really, really hard on Stetson Bennett because of what happened in that first Alabama game. He struggled during the regular season. JT Daniels comes in and plays the role of savior. But if you actually go back and you look at the stats, his stats are pretty strong. It looks like he would be as good as JT Daniels on paper than what we saw out of JT Daniels last year. A lot of injury concerns with JT Daniels, lack of play time is a concern with JT Daniels. And at this point in the season, it's likely too late, in my opinion, to be able to get him up to speed quick enough to put him in a championship caliber game and just throw all of our marbles in that basket and just be like, we're going to ride with JT Daniels. At this point, it really has to be Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, so as much of the valuation that people have based on recruiting rankings and based on expectation rather than what's been produced on the field, meaning that Stetson Bennett's always been a Georgia guy, wanted to go to Georgia, but he's a walk-on. He was a 3-star. That brings with it a certain perception of how good he is versus JT Daniels is a 5-star, started at USC, expected to be a great quarterback. So people look at him as he is a great quarterback versus Stetson Bennett as a fill-in guy?
It's true that whenever JT Daniels was recruited, he was number 3 in the nation behind Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. And that was after he reclassified. When he classified the first time, he was actually number 1 in the country. So there's a lot of talent there. However, the college football is full of 5-star players that end up being a bust. It's actually more likely that a 5-star player will become a bust than will become a elite running back. If we go back to the years of Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall was actually rated higher than Todd Gurley, but we know how that turned out. So there's something.
Although he wasn't a bust, to be fair.
He wasn't a bust. Fair enough. He wasn't a bust, but he wasn't quite as good as Todd Gurley. So I think sometimes as fans and analysts, we really put too much faith in the recruiting aspect of it instead of looking at what we have on the field. And I can make a great comparison. If we go back and we look at Joe Burrow, he wasn't lights out, coming out of high school. He wasn't lights out his first 2 or 3 years. Took a big chance in going to LSU. People were actually telling him, don't go to LSU. You're going to do nothing but hand the ball off. They're a run-heavy team. Guy goes down there and wins a national championship. So the question is on what part of the spectrum is Stetson Bennett going to fall? And is he going to fall closer to the higher side, which it looks to be the case? But unfortunately, I think Georgia fans have that stigmatism of watching Stetson Bennett. And by the way, a lot of people don't realize this. Stetson Bennett actually played on the same team as Jake Fromm. So he was back up to Jake Fromm. And guess who else was on that team that everybody loves? George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock. All of those guys were on the same team together. So they've been there a long, long time. Stetson Bennett has a wealth of knowledge from playing at Georgia that JT Daniels doesn't have yet. Now, he may get it, but not at this point. I think JT Daniels may go on to become an outstanding quarterback, but I think a couple of things are factoring into that. Is how Stetson Bennett has played in the past in some of the bigger games. That scares Georgia fans. And also the fact that he doesn't have this super 5-star phenom rating. And I think they're letting that get ahead of where his talent really lies.
Got Big Dog Brett on the line from YouTube. Catch him right here on this platform. So just type Big Dog Brett up into the search panel, and you'll find him right here on YouTube talking Georgia football as the Bulldogs prepare for their finale against Georgia Tech. But I wanted to take it, continue this conversation with Alabama, because that's everybody's aim. And it's been talked about all season. You've got your folks that think it's going to be an epic classic, and you've got your folks that think Georgia's just too good, flat out too good this year, this Georgia edition. The one thing I would say in Alabama's struggles, it seems to be an offensive line issue that maybe they've cleaned up to a certain extent, but that's why they struggled against LSU and Texas A&M among some other teams. So obviously Georgia's dominated everybody since Clemson. That was a good game, close game. Alabama's had its issues against the likes of Florida, LSU, Texas A&M. So your thoughts about where the advantages lie in the matchups against Bama?
So Georgia obviously is going to want to lean on its defense, but Georgia has a really solid offense. A lot of people kind of discount it and probably shouldn't. Alabama's averaging 44 points a game. Georgia's averaging 40. Alabama's got a pretty solid defense, but it's nowhere near the caliber of Georgia. You know, they're allowing almost 20 points a game versus Georgia allowing just over 7.5. So it's pretty difficult to weigh those two out on a number scale. But one of the things I keep looking at is whenever you see that Georgia played some of the same teams and the scores were wildly different. Georgia and Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Arkansas, Alabama, Florida. Scores were wildly different. I understand the transitive property doesn't necessarily apply in college football. Alabama seems to want to throw the ball quite a bit more than they pass, and Georgia's extremely balanced. Georgia's weakness, at least against some of the opponents we've played, seems to be the deep ball threat, the deep ball coverage. Georgia's strength lies in its defensive line, especially in Jordan Davis. they're going to have to account for Jordan Davis. Watching how much I have seen the Alabama quarterback scramble and run, I'm really concerned that he's going to have difficulty against Georgia. Georgia seems to do really well against running quarterbacks, whether it's Mr. Ritter from Cincinnati, Ian Book from Notre Dame. The running quarterbacks seem to struggle. I can't remember the exact number of times that we sacked the Clemson quarterback, but I think it was 5+. If you go back to the last game Georgia played before CSU, I believe we played Tennessee. I think he was sacked 5 times plus. He was pretty mobile. Georgia kind of has a great plan for not just getting after the quarterback, but managing to contain them. And that's going to play a big factor. What's that?
Bo Nix.
Yeah, Bo Nix. Yeah.
Yeah, they took care of those guys.
So that doesn't concern me. It's the deep ball threat and the quick strike. That was a concern against Tennessee. And there were quite a few times where I felt like they had receivers that were open. If they'd had maybe a little better of a quarterback, more experienced, or better receivers like Mechie, who can put himself in a little better position, that's going to be a problem. If Georgia can maintain possession, if Georgia can come out and continue to keep their foot on the gas, I think it's going to be a good game. I could still see Georgia winning this game by 10 points. But I think for fans that think this is going to be a blowout game, I don't agree with that assessment. I think Alabama's got a really solid football team. They got a lot of talent on that field. Nick Saban is arguably the greatest coach of all time. And that's what you're going up against. There's only been one assistant that's ever beat him. And it's an impressive resume. So you got to contend with all that. To throw your hands up and say, oh, Georgia's going to kill him. Well, that's what we're going to tell each other. But if we're going to be objective, you got to say they've got a lot of weapons. We've got a lot of weapons. What's going to happen? I think it's really going to come down to Georgia stopping the explosive downfield passing. If we can stop that, we'll do well.